I really love Fire Emblem Three Houses. I went into this game with actually pretty high expectations just based on the amount of research I did before getting it, and needless to say, the game somehow managed to surpass all of them. There really isn't anything not to love here. Great characters, a great soundtrack, fantastic story, especially the villains, lots of really interesting themes at play, 4 different routes to play through, 5 if you include the DLC, and lots of gay. It's an all-around great experience, and in my opinion, a must-have for the Switch, up there with Breath of the Wild and Smash Ultimate. There is one small problem, though. The Verdant Wind path, tied to the Golden Deer house, and the Silver Snow path, tied to the Black Eagle house, are virtually one and the same in terms of story progression. The only real exception is the final boss battle of each. And a lot of Golden Deer loyalists claim that Verdant Wind is the superior route, and Silver Snow is a cheap knockoff of it. But I, my friends, am here today to tell you that these people are wrong. Today I will make my case as to why Silver Snow is, in fact, the superior route. So, without further ado, let's hop right into it. Disclaimer. Just so everyone knows, despite that intro, all of these are my opinions based on my interpretations of the story. I'm not saying Silver Snow is necessarily the objectively better route, plus I do have a bit of bias considering Silver Snow is the first path I played through. Also, I'm going to be referring to Byleth with female pronouns for this video, because that's the one I used on all of my playthroughs, and I also just like her better than the male one. Okay, now let's actually start. If you know me in real life, you know that I am the biggest asshole you'll ever meet. But how about we change it up a bit and start this on a positive note? Things I preferred about Verdant Wind. This is not me giving any shit to Seteth. In fact, he's one of my favorite characters, mostly because you probably start by thinking he's gonna be nothing but an uptight asset to the obviously evil Rhea. But as the story progresses, you realize that he's just a guy who wants to live a nice, peaceful life with his daughter. That and he's basically the only thing keeping the church from imploding. But he's not exactly Lord material. He doesn't have a compelling backstory like Claude, and while he faced the same hardships as Rhea, he doesn't get hung up on it like she does, which is what makes Rhea an interesting character. Also, I've always been under the impression that Rhea is the only direct child of Sothis remaining, and Seteth and Flame were just descendants of previous generations of Nabateans. So yeah, Sothis' death probably hurt him, but not as much as it would were he her direct child. On top of this, Claude is just a much more driven character who knows what he wants. Like I said before, Seteth just wants to settle down with Flame and not have to worry about people trying to steal her blood. In the Protecting Garreg Mach battle, in all routes except Crimson Flower, they have some ally NPC run up the side of the map and use the ballista to launch a trap that sets the whole town alight and drive off the Imperial forces. This doesn't fit very well with Silver Snow and Azure Moon, because Seteth and Gilbert aren't exactly schemers, while Claude is a spry young lad and it was oft brought up that he comes up with schemes to outsmart his enemies. This was just so awkward in Silver Snow, which is especially weird because Silver Snow was made first, but the costume idea feels so much more fitting of Verdant Wind. Like, Seth is like, the costumes are ready, and you're all like, what are you talking about? And he's like, this is your idea. And then it just continues like, what was that about? I thought that would be a plot point about Byleth starting to grow weaker and like losing her memory because of Sothis' power or whatever, but no. Whatever. In Verdant Wind, the Golden Deer are discussing what to do after Murden, and Hilda has one of her broken clock is right twice a day moments, and she suggests they dress as Imperial soldiers to get into the fort, which makes so much more sense and fits so much better than the weird coming up with the idea off-screen thing. Now I have a problem with how the information in Verdant Wind is delivered, but I do concede that the information given there is much better than in Silver Snow. In Silver Snow, Rhea tells you that she placed Sothis' heart in Byleth when she was born, and that's it. Hell, she doesn't even tell you she's Saros, which you probably could have inferred anyway, but the point still stands. Azure Moon is the only other route where she's not formally revealed as Saros, and I'll let that stand because that route is much more about Dimitri and Edelgard than Fodlan. The information given about the truth of everything that happened in Fodlan should have been more evenly spread. Talk about everything that happened before Sothis went to sleep in Silver Snow, and talk about the eradication of the Nabateans and the War of Heroes in Verdant Wind. Okay, I'm going to talk about this in more detail later, because I have problems with both of the final battles of these routes, just from a story standpoint, but in my opinion, the final battle of Verdant Wind is objectively better. A much better map than the disaster known as Garibok Town, less fucking around trying to destroy armor, and just a generally cooler concept of the 10 elites thing. Like I said, I'm going to touch on both final battles later on, so this isn't the end of my thoughts on this. And that's all I really thought was better than Silver Snow. Now let's rip into this thing. Reunion at Dawn is so stupid in Verdant Wind, and it makes so much more sense in Azure Moon and Silver Snow. Anyway, Azure Moon's Reunion at Dawn makes sense because Dimitri's insane, so it's not too crazy to imagine him wanting to kill some random thieves just for funsies. It makes you think, oh man, he's really gone off the deep end. And Silver Snow, Seth is attached to the church, and it makes sense for him to want to go after the thieves because the monastery is already in a pretty awful condition, and for him to come back to immediately find people vandalizing it would probably piss him off. Plus, it demonstrates how worse for wear the monastery has become, that people are basically just coming by and taking things. In Verdant Wind, Claude is just like, yeah, let's go kill some thieves for some exercise, and it's just so out of character for him. He has no major attachment to the church like Seth, and he's still sane unlike Dimitri. So what do you have to gain from this? Why are you going after these random thieves that are just trying to survive? Compared to Silver Snow, Verdant Wind's cast feels a lot less impactful, I guess is how I'd put it. In Silver Snow, you have this kind of ragtag group of nobles who have lost their positions of power and are implied to have just been drifting around trying to avoid seizure by Edelgard for the past few years, plus Seth and Flame of the Knights, and the church has been stripped of power, so they're not much better off. You're kind of starting from the ground up, which makes it all the more satisfying when the very people Edelgard stripped of power and forced to abdicate are coming back to fight her. On top of this, it also does a better job of demonstrating the horrors of war. Most of these people have parents that are in support of the Empire, which means they're going to be potentially going toe-to-toe with their own flesh and blood. Meanwhile, in Verdant Wind, you have a group of people who are still nobles, not counting the few commoners in the bunch, and still have power in their group. Yeah, they can't influence Edelgard, but it just takes away from that.
Started from the bottom, now we're here. Started from the bottom, now the whole team fucking here.
Feel that I at least got from Silver Snow. They still command regions and armies, and have power. Plus, Edelgard didn't wrong any of them personally. In fact, she's even supporting some of them. It just didn't feel as triumphant and satisfying to bring her down. In both Silver Snow and Verdant Wind, the monastery requests assistance from Judith, the leader of House Daphnel in the Alliance. In Silver Snow, that's pretty much it. You go to Aelel, fight off some Imperial troops, get troops from her, and you're done. She serves her purpose in the story well and leaves. But in Verdant Wind, she decides to stick with Claude for some reason. Don't get me wrong, I like Judith. She's cool and she meshes well with the other deer. But she didn't really add much to the story besides what I just mentioned. She didn't become a playable unit, and she doesn't really add much emotional conflict to the story. So, like, what was the point of her still hanging out? In Verdant Wind, at Fort Merceus, Claude calls upon the Elmira troops for assistance. This is a great idea, and it makes sense, but then it kinda doesn't make sense. First of all, why on this map? I feel like it would make much more sense for them to show up as reinforcements in Enbar, or even the Palace, not only from a story standpoint, but also a gameplay standpoint. Fort Merceus is, in my experience, one of, if not the most embarrassingly easy maps. The Elmira troops would have been much more helpful in Enbar, for me at least. Also, they shouldn't just show up and leave right away. They could at least talk to us after the battle. Have them hang around for the rest of the game if you're gonna have Judith stick around. This one was kind of a given. Edelgard's death just makes no sense in Verdant Wind. And you kill her, one of those anime-style cutscene plays, and Edelgard, knowing she's defeated, delivers this emotional soliloquy kind of thing, and she's like, you must kill me, because she knows her defeat is really the only thing that can stop the war at this point. And just as Byleth is about to bring her sword down on Edelgard, she says,
I wanted to walk with you.
In Silver Snow, this makes a lot of sense, and it's pretty rough. In part when you get to understand and learn about this girl, her goals and her struggles and the horrible trauma she faced. And you get why she's doing what she's doing. It's unfortunate this is how things had to be, but like she said, their chosen paths would never cross. But in Verdant Wind, this cutscene makes absolutely no sense. She delivers the same spiel as in Silver Snow, but this time, I imagine it would feel like they tried too hard to make it emotional if you played Verdant Wind first. And this cutscene wouldn't have the same impact as it did if you played Silver Snow. Like, you barely know this lady. Why is she talking about how she wants to walk the same path as you? and Violet's hesitation to just finish her off doesn't make sense here. Again, all she knows about her is that she plunged the continent into war. It was at this point in Verdant Wind that I started to think that this route was inferior to Silver Snow. So after killing Edelgard, Claude gets the letter from Hubert that says they have to kill the Agarthans because they're going to rain terror on Fodlan otherwise. After that, they rescue Rhea, and she gives some exposition about the Agarthans and why we have to kill them. And I'm going to stop you right there. First of all, why would Claude agree to do this? In Silver Snow, it's excusable, because Seddon and Flynn have been around since ancient times, and know themselves that these people have been stirring up trouble for so long. But Claude himself doesn't entirely trust Rhea. He said he was prepared to ask her a lot of questions when they found her, and at this point he is aware that she's been withholding a lot of potentially valuable information from the people of Fodlan. And on top of that, he is aware that she is upholding a potentially corrupt and racist system in Fodlan that causes commoners and people from outside of the continent to be unable to rise in society. In fact, he addresses it literal minutes before they rescue her. Oh, and did I mention, Claude is leading an army to slaughter a race he knows basically nothing about, which goes entirely against his whole holding hands and singing Kumbaya with everyone else thing he was explaining to Violet like literally a few minutes before this. Speaking of which... Now I know what you might be thinking. You already said Claude's a better lord than Sedith. And yes, objectively speaking, Claude is a more compelling lord, and more fitting of the title than Sedith. But in terms of what the themes of this route are supposed to be, racism and solving problems through diplomacy, as many have pointed out, Claude's route is potentially the bloodiest one there is. So you have all the same events as Silver Snow, plus the battle at Grounder, Nemesis coming back and killing people, something exclusive to this route, a whole race wiped out, and a longer war than in Silver Snow and Crimson Flower. In fact, in the battle at Grounder, Claude's just like, well, we gotta fight both of them, and ruthlessly slaughters the Blue Lions, who basically have nothing left except each other. And yes, you could say Dimitri was too far gone to reason with, but the least Claude could have done was just go for Edelgard, but you have to defeat both of them for the battle to end. Claude also never even tries to talk to Edelgard, and yeah, that probably would have been a fruitless effort, but at least Dimitri tries to talk her down in Azure Moon, and even gives her one final chance to live. In Silver Snow, this isn't as much of a problem, because Sedith and Flynn don't have grand ambitions to cancel racism like Claude does. They just want to rescue Rhea and have things go back to normal so they can live in peace. Oh, and about that racism thing. After playing Azure Moon, I realized that Verdant Wind's idea of fixing racism is the equivalent of posting a black square on Instagram, and Hilda is Claude's white boyfriend who says the N-word. Azure Moon proves the innocence of the Dusker people, and unlike Hilda, Ingrid actually does realize that her prejudices were misplaced, and that she should be hating the people responsible for the tragedy regardless of their race, not the people of Dusker as a whole. With Hilda, it's reversed, and she basically regards Cyril as one of the good ones. Also, Ingrid at least has a somewhat decent reason to hold prejudices against the people of Dusker because she lost her fiancé in the tragedy, while Hilda just knows her brother fights all Myrons and is like,
silly black people. They always think they can accomplish everything by just sitting around.
Also, the Blue Lions never go out of their way to attack the Agarthans. They kill Cornelia and Arundel, who are heavily implied to be Agarthans disguised as humans, but they only kill them because they're directly obstructing their objectives. There's never a direct confrontation involving them. This is less something I don't like about Verdant Wind and more so something I prefer about Silver Snow. I absolutely love this ending because in my opinion it's the ultimate we won but at what cost ending. Yes, order is restored and Fodlan is united, but look at what we had to do to get here. We had to kill Edelgard, our former student and friend. We had to genocide a race, and we had to kill poor broken Rhea, driven insane by her years of captivity in Enbar. That final cutscene is so emotional and beautiful. In Verdant Wind, it's just, we killed the Red Lady and then some old guy. And Claude's power of friendship speech being a distraction is awesome, of course, but not bittersweet like the other endings. And bittersweet is how a finale to a game like this should feel. Verdant Wind's ending feels so out of place when you put it next to the other three. This was ultimately the straw that broke the camel's back for me. In Silver Snow, Rhea seems to understand and accept her wrongdoings. In her rest report, she even wonders if she deserves to live anymore. She realizes that trying to resurrect Sothis was not only morally wrong, but was also damaging to her already precarious mental state. Rhea also relinquishes her position to Byleth, not because she knew she would die, but because she realizes that she's too emotionally unstable to have such a position of authority, and Byleth, who's shown herself to be strong, capable, and mature, is a much more appropriate fit for that role. In Verdant Wind, it's hinted several times that Rhea has ulterior motives or knows more than she's letting on, and I was like, oh god, what did we find out that she did? And we find out that she lied about practically everything regarding the history of Podlin, but it was actually because she was entirely a victim and you should feel bad for her. Just ignore all the human experimentation and brutality though. Where's the nuance here? This feels like such a major step down in the writing's quality. What happened here? Why is Rhea purely innocent now? This leads me to my final point. Okay, this is where I'm getting back to the whole final battle thing. First of all, I just wanted to say both of these final battle themes absolutely slap. The sheer motion and Funeral of Flowers and God Shattering Star's epic opera give me chills every time. But I digress. Like I said, I love the ending of Silver Snow, but the final battle kind of comes out of nowhere. Rhea goes insane because they needed a final battle. It ultimately results in a quality ending, but I couldn't really get over that after I finished the game my first time. But on the other hand, Nemesis really isn't much better. It doesn't give me the same emotion the other ones did. In Silver Snow, we're forced to kill Rhea because she went insane, not because she's evil. And in Crimson Flower, while I didn't feel as much sympathy for Rhea because you see how much of a twisted monster she can truly be, I still felt a little bad because, similarly to Dimitri, she was probably near her breaking point already, especially after Sothis disappeared into Byleth. Add to that the betrayal of what she saw as her final hope at resurrecting her mother, turning on her and siding with someone working in conjunction with the ones who killed her family. Of course she would go off the deep end. In Azure Moon, it's the same as I said before. It was my final route, and I'd come to love Edelgard so much already, and her and Dimitri's discussion only a few days prior that seemed to indicate some hope of reconciliation between the two had vanished. Edelgard was prepared to fight to the bitter end to see her goals through. In Verdant Wind, I'm fighting some guy? Yeah, he's a bad guy, but he's not someone I emotionally understand, like Rhea and Edelgard. They have justifiable reasons for doing what they did, but this guy is just some old dead guy who is evil because...
Every villain is Lemons, otherwise known as evil!
Not because he has horrible mental scars. This is my major problem with Verdant Wind as a whole. It makes things seem more black and white than they are. In Silver Snow, while you were opposing Edelgard, you understood the reasons behind her actions. Same applies to Azure Moon. Here you just get Edelgard and the Agathans are the bad guys, and Rhea and the Nabateans are the good guys. There isn't much moral gray, and it doesn't show war and conflict like it does in the other routes. That either side isn't necessarily good, and that it's pretty shitty no matter how you look at it. But I've gotten way off topic. So, to sum up what I've said so far, both final battles of these routes are random and don't really make much sense. We're also both really inconsistent. Why is Nemesis break free only in Verdant Wind and Rhea goes insane only in Silver Snow? Anyway... I have a proposal. Why don't we remove Nemesis from the picture entirely, because like I said, he really doesn't fit as a final boss for a game like Three Houses, and replace the final battles of both with things that already exist. Make Edelgard the final boss of Silver Snow, and make Rhea the final boss of Verdant Wind. To be entirely honest, I tried writing these endings, but I couldn't find one that really worked, and still had the story flow well. I don't know how exactly you could incorporate these into the story smoothly. I am a teenager who likes a game where Jesus is a sexy dragon, not a writer by any stretch. So, if you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear how you guys would cleanly work these ideas into the story. In conclusion, Verdant Wind fails at being a route that I can appreciate because it makes the story far too black and white. Without Edelgard's backstory being developed, she's purely a villain with no nuance or reason behind her actions. Rhea is made out to be entirely a victim, with her wrongdoings not expanded on nearly enough. The final boss is some generic evil bad guy with no reason for doing what he does. By the end of the story, it felt like nobody learned anything and all of the bad things that happened are just swept under the rug. Azure Moon and Silver Snow have appropriately tragic endings, and they showed how awful this whole situation was very clearly. And yes, Crimson Flower's ending is also a little too upbeat, but it fulfills Edelgard's character arc, so it's a bit more excusable in my opinion. Speaking of Edelgard, this story also entirely misportrays her character. Silver Snow tells of a tormented young woman who wants her trauma to mean something. Crimson Flower tells of an emperor who pulls back the curtain on her religion and exposes its ugly side. Azure Moon tells of a misguided ruler who will sacrifice everything for her goals. And Verdant Wind tells the story of some bad people who are bad because reasons. Verdant Wind replaces tragic villains who have decent reasons for their actions with a lame and uncreative dark cult that's actually the true mastermind plot. Two well-written, fascinating characters were thrown away and replaced by the evil Red Lady and the innocent Green Lady. The quality writing and world building made by the other 3 routes seems to have been replaced for this one, and that was the big thing that made this route a bust, at least for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Like I said, I adore this game so much, and I just had to share my opinions about it. I know I haven't uploaded in almost a year, and this is pretty far removed from my old content, but you know what? Writing and editing video essays is a lot of fun, and I like to ramble about things that I find interesting, more than provide dry commentary over some generic gameplay. Plus, the Let's Play genre has kind of died out because the YouTube algorithm got bored of them, so that's not a very viable option for content anymore. That aside, I do have several ideas for upcoming videos, most notably about FNAF. Quite a lot has been happening with FNAF since the last time I touched it, and I'd love to talk about it more. I also have a couple scripts in the work for other franchises I enjoy, like Portal and The Legend of Zelda. So if you enjoyed this video, then consider subscribing, and keep an eye out for those. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye!